Hello everyone! This is Andrew James Dilakin, the first reporter to our subject, Teaching and Assessment of Macro Skills. So for today's video, definitely I'll be reporting something about the general concept about macro skills and some of the theories and principles in teaching the macro skills. So let's start our presentation. So definitely we define macro skills as a set of skill which is actually primary, key, main, and the largest skill, which is actually relative to a particular context. And when we think about the English language, we actually think listening, speaking, reading, and writing. Those are the things that we come up to our mind when we say macro skills. So basically, in the context of first language acquisition, those four skills are actually the main ingredient for us to be able to be fluent, for us to be able to communicate to other people, wherein we use those skills for us to be able to enhance our communicative competence so that we could connect to other people and communicate effectively. So, in the context of first language acquisition, the four skills are most often acquired in order of listening first. Why? It's simply because imagine a baby. A baby cannot speak a specific sound or cannot, say something if they have not hear anything. So basically, listening comes first. Right after that, once they familiarize the sound, they try to mimic it. They try to duplicate it. They try to say it. And basically, it comes with listening first, followed by speaking. Right after they speak, possibly they can attain reading, and right after that, they can produce their own writing. So let's go to the classification of macro skills. So first one is according to medium. When we say medium, it is actually how does the skill portrayed or utilized. It's either oral by the use of words, through speaking, and of course through written works. And at the same time, it is actually being classified as the role of language, wherein the encoder, which is the one who sends information, and the decoder, the one who receives the information or listen to the information. Third one would be the receptive skills. So when we say receptive skills, those are a type of skill that we receive or absorb to something. First one would be listening, and of course reading. These two skills are actually classified as receptive skills. It's simply because they receive information and it absorbed by a person. And the fourth one would be productive skills, wherein it can be enhanced and at the same time it can be produced by a certain person. So what skills are those? Basically, it's speaking and writing, wherein you can familiarize those concepts, wherein a specific person is able to produce their own writing piece or literary pieces, and at the same time for a specific person who actually acquired a great enhancement on their speaking skills. Next one, always remember in oral skills, it classifies the listening as the receptive skill and speaking as the productive skill. And on literary skills, we classify reading as receptive skills and writing as productive skills, wherein receptive skills are actually the most functional and the most primary skill that we can use, because without those skills we cannot step up to another stage of acquiring the language, which are the speaking and writing. So good language teachers actually plan lessons and sequences of lessons which covers all the macro skills rather than focusing on one micro skill at a time. Why? It's simply because we need to maintain the equilibrium and balance of those skills, wherein there will be no stagnant skill phases for that one. It's simply because we need to make sure and guarantee that all skills were covered at a time, because there are times that some people will actually learn how to speak. However, when they given a chance to write down their outline or write down the report, basically they cannot produce something. That is actually the gap that we need to eradicate as a future English teachers. We need to make sure that our lesson plans, our activities are actually interrelated with all of the macro skills. Next one would be good language learners should have a stronger receptive skills, rather than the productive skills. Why? It's simply because we need to make sure that students should have stronger receptive skills, because they can absorb all of those information. In that particular way, we can enhance and we can make sure that they are actually following the right thing. And moving forward, we will now go to the first skill under macro skill in terms of current principles and concepts. So first one would be speaking. So we all know that speaking is actually a type of skill that uses our oral organs. That includes our lungs, our voice box, our feet, our lips, our mouths, which actually articulate and at the same time process all the wordings and vocabularies that we have in our mind. And also, it is actually a complex process that involves simultaneous attention in terms of content, vocabulary, discourse, information structuring, morphosyntax, sound system, prosody, and pragmalinguistic features. That is actually according to Hinkle 2006. So that only means that we actually, as English teachers in the future, we need to make sure that our speaking skills is actually fluent and proficient at all time. It's simply because how can we teach the language if we're not able to portray it in the right way? If we do have some fillers, if we are buckling up, if we are actually not able to express our thoughts through speaking. So, in teaching speaking, it also involves effective communication. And at the same time, it requires strategies, discourse organization, structuring, conversational routines, or small talks, speech acts, and conversation formulas like form of address. And at the same time, in regards with speaking proficiency, it can be measured through fluency, comprehensibility, and accuracy. So first one would be oral fluency. So when we say this thing, it actually refers to speakers' automaticity of oral production. That is actually according to Derwing, Monroe, and Thompson 2007. It can be achieved through engagement in communicative interactions and can be enhanced through well-designed and well-planned tasks. So in oral fluency, this only means that you as a speaker, you should be able to achieve the engagement of your listeners, wherein you should have some small talks whenever you do have a oration or when you're actually speaking in front. Why? It's simply because you have to get their attention. Otherwise, basically, they will just find your speaking skills actually not that very much effective, not that very much fluent, such like that. So basically, we need to make sure that we are engaging ourselves to the listeners so that we could be able to say that we're actually fluent in something. Next one would be comprehensibility. So when we say this thing, it actually refers to the ease and difficulty with which a listener understands the second language accented speech. And at the same time, it can be adversely affected by the field pauses and hesitations, that is actually excessive and inappropriate pauses, false starts, and slow speaking rate, that is actually according to Derwing, Monroe, and Thompson 2001. Why? Imagine you're speaking in front of the crowd and then you're actually hesitant, and at the same time you're always say like such like you don't know what to say. So basically, as an audience of that talk, basically I can judge or evaluate your speaking skill as not prepared, something that is actually not actually ready for your speech. So imagine that simple action can actually be the whole judgment for your skill. So basically, you have to make sure that when you use specific language, you're actually following all the rules. You're actually engaging yourself to the crowd. And at the same time, you always come prepared for that one. For us to be able to make sure that you can accomplish your speaking form of reporting. At the same time, for the last part, that will be accuracy. When we say accuracy, it's actually the correctness. It's actually the relationship between grammar and pronunciation, wherein when you use or pronounce words, you make sure that it's actually the right sound in the right context. And at the same time, the speaker should be able to use the proper diction. When we say diction, it's actually the choices of words that you will be using, wherein you should make sure that it's actually easy to understand by the crowd or the audience. And at the same time, make sure that the content areas in regards with the rules and agreements are being met, wherein you are actually making sure that your diction, your grammar, and pronunciation are actually aligned in the same direction, so that you could be able to get a very much crowded applause for that one. So that's gonna be all for my reporting for this day. I hope you learned something from it. And by the way, this is Andrew James D. Lacan that always say, thank you for watching and stay safe at home. Goodbye.
So now let us proceed to the next macro skill, which is the listening. And I am Meryl Joy P. Balilo, your second discussant for tonight. In learning, there are 4 macro skills that we must deal in order to communicate effectively. And one of them is listening, wherein listening is the ability to accurately receive and interpret messages in the communication process. And according to Ross 2005, it is a complex process that involves the understanding of spoken data and involves receptive, interpretative, or constructive cognitive process. And it says that listening and listening comprehension is actually the same. So, listening is one of the most important skill that we must have or we can have. However, it is also the most critical elements in learning language, for it is the key for speaking, and it is also the basis for the other two, which is the reading and writing. So without listening effectively, the messages are easily misunderstood. And he also added that second language listening has 3 sub-processes, namely decoding, comprehension, and interpretation. Wherein decoding, it mostly it focuses on a word's meaning. Decoding of messages is how an individual interpret or able to understand the message. So simply, decoding is is the process of interpretation and the translation of information. And next is comprehension. It is the process of understanding and making senses of the spoken language, which it includes recognizing the speech sounds, um, and knowing knowing each word's meaning and the syntax of sentences which they are presented. And lastly, the interpretation. It is the process in which we try to make meaning out of that information in order to, or in for us to able to attach meaning by connecting information to previous experiences. And as regards to listening pedagogy, Hinkel 2006 current says that current listening pedagogy also involves the enhancement of metacognitive and cognitive strategies to facilitate comprehension. So, when we say metacognitive strategies, it refers to the methods used to help students understand the way how they learn, and it is the process designed for students to think about their thinking. So in metacognitive strategies, it includes self-monitoring, evaluating, and the comprehension process, while as for cognitive strategies, it is the one type of learning strategies that learners use in order to learn more successfully. Interferencing, summarizing, and note-taking are included in this strategy. And similar to reading, most listening materials for pedagogical purposes are often created, simplified, and graded subjectively according to Lynch 1998. This situation runs contrary to the widely accepted practice of using authentic materials in the classrooms. So, in here, the concern is that listening would be highly difficult if they use authentic materials like using graded listening tests. However, Field says that, or he argued that there are several concerns but they only focus on the quantity rather than they don't consider to improve the comprehension of each students. And next is Mendelssohn 1998 has outlined teaching strategies for a strategy-based second language listening. The first strategy is that to make learners aware of the value of using strategies in listening, and it followed by pre-listening activities which the teacher will provide to activate and get the attention of the learner's schema, and then the listeners are explained on what they will listen and why they will listen, and then the learners are allowed to practice strategies in meaning focused context and to process that has been listened to for note taking and summarizing. And then lastly, the learners are encouraged to self-evaluate, or they will evaluate the level of their comprehension. And related to Mendelssohn's 1998 proposal, Wilson 2003 proposed the discovery listening, which approach which is a response to the heavy emphasis given by most published textbooks on practicing comprehension rather than teaching learners the skills needed for an improved performance. And the discovery learning has three phases, which is the listening, reconstructing, and the discovering. And discovery learning or listening allows the learner to notice the differences between the original text and the text that they have reconstructed after a listening task. So, the task has three phases. First is listening. In listening, it allows learners to listen to a text without any note-taking, and they will assess their comprehension level. And then, again, they will listen to the text twice with note-taking. And as for reconstruction, it allows the learners to reconstruct or recreate the text as a group. And for the last is discovering. Discovering will follow, which allows the students or the learners to compare the reconstructed text to the original text, and they will classify the causes of errors. And after that, they will assess their errors, and they will listen again to and assess their performance.
So good evening, ma'am, and good evening, classmates. So I am Mary Claire Aton, your presenter for tonight. So let's proceed to the continuation of our topic under the current principles and concept of the teaching of the macro skills. So this is the third one, which is the viewing. So the dominance of visual media in our lives today has led to the inclusion of viewing of the language macro skills. So what is viewing? Viewing refers to perceiving, examining, interpreting, and construction meaning from visual images, and is crucial to improving comprehension of print and non-print materials. So by the means of viewing different things around you, you are able to come up with an idea or thought. So you don't need to read it aloud. So by the means of viewing, you can gain meaning of everything, of different things around you, and it increases our comprehension when it comes to viewing. So there are new forms of literacy, which are the media literacy and the visual literacy. So what is media literacy? Media literacy refers to the ability to access, analyze, and evaluate media and technology information that involves moving images and sound effects. So through media literacy, we learn how to access, to analyze, and evaluate media technology that involves moving images and sound effects. So what are the moving images? Say for example, the trailers of the movies and the news footage. When we watch those, we analyze and evaluate what was the possible outcomes, or what are their possible outcomes. So next is sound effects. So we usually see and hear sound effects when we are watching a vlog, when we hear different sound effects like funny sound effects, crowd sound effects, and so on and so forth. So according to De Abreu 2004, developing media literacy would help students question and critically analyze messages provided to them via media, which facilitates critical viewing and thinking. So when we learn to develop media literacy, we start questioning and analyzing messages provided via media. We are building our curiosity. So in classroom setting, enhancing media literacy involves learners analyzing their own media consumption habits and identifying the author, the purpose, point of view of television and radio programs, advertisement, and films. So, isn't it during our senior high school days, we have our subject called Media and Information Literacy, wherein we study the do's and don'ts of a person when it comes to media and teach us how to identify different things in media, because everything in media can be deceitful and it can be biased. So we seek to identify the truth. So the next is the visual literacy. So visual literacy, according to Glorgis, Johnson, Bonomo, Colbert, and al. 1999, visual literacy, on the other hand, refers to the power of giving meaning to and building up similar messages for visual messages, and the ability to construct meaning from images. So, visual literacy simply talks about giving meaning through images. So, for example, in pedestrian lane, in pedestrian sign, we see the color red light. We automatically stop without seeing a word there, stop, for you to stop. It is same as in the color green. And next example is the no smoking sign. The no smoking sign, by seeing this signage, we automatically think that smoking is prohibited in that particular area. So, as Kang 2004 put it, visual literacy is as important as language and textual literacy. It thus obliges teacher to explore the potential of visual and spatial instructional strategies to better facilitate the learning. One way to realize this kind of instruction is through visual organizers. So what is visual organizers? Visual organizers are visual systems of using spatial frameworks such as diagrams, maps, or charts to organize and present structural knowledge in a content domain. So there are four types of visual organizers: the web-like organizers, or semantic map, or spider map. And next is hierarchical organizers, the concept map or network tree. Matrix organizers, compare or contrast matrix. Linear organizers, the Venn diagram, continuum, chain of events, and storyboards. So the first is web-like organizers. Web-like organizers, or a spider map organizer, is a brainstorming or organizational tool that provides a visual framework for students to use. So a spider map has a main idea or topic in the center or at the body, which is this, and each detail or subtopic associated with the main idea has its own leg or branch surrounding the main idea, which is this. So next is hierarchical organizers. So hierarchical organizers, this graphic organizers is useful in concept-based teaching. It allows students to see the big picture or the concept at the top, and as well as the topic underneath, and then the facts at the bottom. So it can also use for classifying topics and attributes. And the third one is the matrix organizers, or compare and contrast matrix. So compare and contrast matrix graphic organizers allow a student to do just that: compare and contrast multiple objects, characters, or concepts from the given text. They are able to see the multiple differences or similarities by creating several different subtopics they want to investigate further. So the last one is the linear organizers, the Venn diagram, continuum, chain of events, and the storyboard. So Venn diagram, which is this, Venn diagram is a diagram representing mathematical or logical sets pictorially as circles or closed curves within a enclosing rectangle, common elements of the sets but being represented by the areas of overlap among the circles. Next is the continuum, a continuous sequence in which elements are perceptibly different from each other, although the extremes are quite distinct. So the next is the chain of events, which is this picture. Chain of events is a number of actions and their effects that are contiguous and linked together that results in a particular outcome. And the last one is the storyboard, which is this picture. Storyboard is a sequence of drawings, typically with some directions and dialogue representing the shots planned for a movie or a television production. So that's the end of my report.
Good evening, I'm Anna Maria Aganon of PSN English 32. So my topic is about the current principles and concepts in the teaching of macro skills, which is reading. So traditionally, people imagine reading as a simple process that is linear and passive. Linear means to say that we read from left to right and start to end, while passive, we read but we don't remember what we have read. We just read. So now, reading is a linguistic, social-cultural, physical, and cognitive activity. Linguistic pertains to perceiving a text in order to understand its contents, which results to reading comprehension, while social-cultural, these are the social and cultural factors, which includes the reader, the text, and the reading itself. So, meaning to say, reading is all about getting meaning from the text and putting meaning to the text. Next is, reading requires simultaneous application of skills and sub-processes, which means to say a process of doing it at the same time, such as the author's mood and purpose, includes the main ideas and context clues, and those relating such meanings to the reader's prior or existing knowledge. Next is, according to Chun and Plus, there are two factors that influence reading ability. Number one is the second language proficiency. When we say language proficiency, it is how well an individual have mastered the language. It measures based on its language skills, syntax, phonology, and such that covers the areas or demonstrate the areas of reading ability or language ability. Second is first language reading skills. Reading skills is all about the ability to read, comprehend, and understand. Next is reading is an interactive and problem-solving process making meaning from the text, which means there is a two-way process. And there are characteristics of reading. One is reading is a language skills. Language skills will develop based on systematically practice. For example, for the children, isn't it that when we teach, we first introduce how a certain word can be pronounced or how to say it. For example, the sale. So basically, a child without a prior knowledge how to pronounce it or how to read it, he or she will read it as sale. It's not sale because doesn't have prior knowledge about reading it in English. So basically, their mother tongue will reflect how sale could be read, and that is sale. So you as a teacher, you will first demonstrate or say it aloud to the children how to pronounce sale, and then let them imitate what you just say, and that's it. That is oral drilling. And based also in the language skills, isn't it that those, like for us English students, we practice English as a language not only in the school setting but in the house also, so that we will be fluent in speaking it. Next is reading is a two-way process, which involves the interaction between the reader and the author, or the reader and the text. Next is reading is visual, which while the text transmits to the optic nerve and it requires good eyesight. But for those visually impaired, isn't it that they discovered a model, if that is a model, which is called Braille, so that those visual impaired person will be able to read and learn. Next is reading is a productive process. Productive process which help us academically, personally, and professionally. Well, reading is a part of our everyday life, isn't it? Next is reading is a foundation of good writing. So according to linguists, in order to be a good writer, you should be a good reader. Now, let's proceed to the reading process. Can be viewed from different perspectives. Number one is bottom up. Bottom up is data driven, which means it emphasizes the textual decoding or the lower level processes such as letter and recognizing it. It emphasizes the written or printed text. Next is top down. So top down is content driven, where it emphasizes the schema and the reader's interpretation. So you can interpret a message or a text without memorizing the whole of it. Next is interactive. Interactive possesses both content-driven and data-driven, where you can send and receive datas, and it has an interaction between higher level process, which are the inferencing and interpretation, and the lower level process is the decoding. Next is schema can be distinguished into content schema and formal textual schema. By the way, schema is a framework or a content of knowledge that a person brings to a new ideas or experience. And this content schema pertains to the knowledge about people, history, the world, and the universe. And this formal textual schema, these are the text structures and those rhetorical organizations. And this textual schema, most children have developed their textual schema in their organization of narratives, and narratives includes in our environment or everyday life, or the environment a child live. Next is from the perspective of the language pedagogy. There are guiding principles. One is no reading will occur without comprehension. Ever know the quotation, a reading without comprehension is not a reading. Because basically, the goal of reading is to understand. So if you don't understand what you have read, you are not really reading and you are not getting the idea of the text. Next is developing reading comprehension is learned through making sense of written language. So I think we are practicing it by searching what is the meaning of a certain text or a certain word. We are doing it every now and then, isn't it? That those unfamiliar words, we search them so that we will know what is its meaning. Third is reading development does not follow a linear development skills. student does not develop from part to whole, but whole to part. Um, Smallest to, not smallest to bigger, but bigger and to smallest. Next is, learners should be exposed to authentic materials. These authentic materials could be their interest, their level of interest, so that they can engage themselves and actively participate in the lesson. Next, it is a known fact that reading involves reading strategies and reading skills. These reading strategies pertains to the conscious actions or the actions that you will do in order to learn, or in order to relay, or in order to deliver a message to the children. And reading skills, these are the what we called ability. So meaning to say, reading strategies, it should be learned, and reading skills, you already possess it. So next is, White suggested an assessment regarding reading, so that students may engage themselves and actively participate. One is arouse students' interest. Second is provide learners with things to search for in the text. These are the unfamiliar words. Next is encourage students to discuss the text to one another. An activity wherein they will discuss, or they will get another opinion from their classmates or their group, if ever. Next is ask students to write about what they have read. They will write an essay to read what they have understand to the text, or how they interpret it. And that would be all. Thank you.
So let's now move on to the final or the last principles and concepts in teaching of the macro skills. The last principle is writing. I know all of us already have an idea what is writing. Especially when we were young, our family taught us to write, and as of now, we are using it, especially when listing down notes for important details and important documents that we need to keep. So, according to Merriam-Webster, writing is the act or process of the ones who write, such as visible letters, characters, writing compositions, literary works, and composition of music. So the writing is the act of putting ideas in text, whether print or non-print. It is a non-linear explanatory and generative process as they discovered ideas and formulate them, according to Zamel, 1983. So according to Zamel, writing refers to the act of putting ideas in, whether print or non-print. So any composition that is written, whether in a devices or using a traditional way, which is written by board, pen, pencil, paper. They are all considered as writing. Text type written by the students, according to Sperling and Friedman 2001. So there are three levels of text type written by students. First, the elementary level. In elementary level, the most common types of written are personal and narratives, meaning it belongs to particular person and it concerns with narration. In secondary level, um, it is expository with emphasis on writing about literature. So in secondary level, they are more focused on expanding their knowledge about um, literary works or the literary pieces. And in tertiary level, they expand their writing to argumentative essays, which means they expand their knowledge about expressing different or opposite views or systematic using a systematic reasoning. So the first language to second language writing relationship. Kobayashi and Rayner 2008 argued that the transfer of writing skills happen in a bidirectional way, meaning it has an opposite direction from first language to second language or vice versa. And they further conclude that the writing the writing competence can be transferred across the language. Cecil Morsha Olstein 2000 states that well-written text has two features, which is the coherence and cohesion. Coherence relates to pragmatic features and culturally acceptable rhetorical organization, structure, and sequence, while cohesion is the linguistic consequence of coherence through the use of cohesive devices, making it an overt feature of a text. So the difference between coherence and cohesion is that coherence is the connection of ideas at the idea level, and it refers to the rhetorical aspects, while cohesion, the connection of ideas, is at the sentence level, and it refers to the grammatical aspects. Rawlinson's 2005 listed some insights that good writing involves. First, need specific audience for writing. Of course, as a writer, you need to know your specific audience because uh, um, when you know your specific audience, you will easily um, know what specific genre you will use in your writing composition. Next involves multiple drafts with feedback. Multiple drafts is important because by this you can choose one that is the best among the rest. Five approaches of teaching writing. First, product approach, process approach, genre approach, process and genre approach, post-process pedagogy. The first is product approach, focuses on what the final piece of writing will look like. So the product approach um, focuses on the final piece of work. You using the vocabulary use, the grammar, mechanics, content, and organization. They measures product using the vocabulary, grammar, mechanics, content, and organization. While the process approach treats all writing as a creative act which requires time and positive feedback to be done well. In process approach, it requires time and positive feedback. And at this part, the teacher moves away from being someone who sets students a writing topic and receive the finished product for correction without any intervention in the process itself. Genre approach attempts to identify the features of successful writing within a defined genre and then teach these features to students. It is important because they will teach students about the genre that is successful and useful in writing, especially for our teachers. We all know that they are more knowledgeable about this. We already know what specific genre that we will use in a specific composition, and they know what is the effective way that we can use. I mean, they know what is the effective genre or the best genre that we will use. Post-process pedagogy. The idea that process is the systematic method for learning writing. One is objective rather than subjective. So in post-process pedagogy, um, it is a process where the plan is not influenced by the personal feelings. So several researchers or scholars propose that grammar correction be excluded from the teaching of writing, and one of them is Truscott 1996. He strongly argued that grammar correction in writing classes should be abandoned because it is ineffective, has detrimental effects, and lack of merit. Truscott believed that grammar correction in writing is ineffective because it is not beneficial and it damages um, the student's ability to write. Next, Paris 2004 argued that there are insufficient studies on error correction in second language writing. She further asserted that, granted the research base in second language composition is inadequate, teachers cannot afford to wait for generalized research findings from second language composition researches. So, aside from Truscott, Ferris also argued about the grammar or error correction in writing. But Ferris focused on the second language writing, which is she believed that second language composition is inadequate and they don't have any they don't have enough resources to use, and they can't afford to wait for the research findings. And lastly, Chang argued that they or the students should be given supplemental grammar instructions based on their needs and instructions on paragraphing and punctuation. So the last is Chang. She argued that because of grammar correction, students must be given instruction based on their needs to write effectively and prevent those grammar correction or error correction.